I'm going to go ahead and get started here on the first part of it. I think Justin still has some stuff to set up for the demo. But my name is McDonald. I'm a security consultant for Coalfire Labs, and so is Justin Berry as well. As you can see here, so Coalfire Labs, we do all sorts of pen testing, risk advisory, all that kind of stuff. Kind of keynote on the talk a couple ago. If you're not sure about if it's the right pen test firm for you, just ask for a sample deliverable. That usually clears up the problem. This happens to be a project that we were working on as more of a PD type training project internally. It started as a hardware hacking physical type scenario that we were going to do for a client, and then it sort of morphed a little bit into more of a radio thing, which is what we'll demo for you guys later on. So, cybersecurity. This is actually, believe it or not, a screenshot from an engagement that I was working on. It was a device used to power really expensive cars that run on electricity and not gas. And when you booted this up, I mean, I spent days reverse engineering the binaries we got from their websites, looking at all the data sheets, trying to figure out what I was going to do. I actually booted it up and connected to a console cable, and it actually stops at a prompt asking if you'd like to enter hack mode. Like, as you can see up there, like, that's real. And sure enough, you hit H and it dropped you into a root prompt. Which is kind of the impetus of this talk. When I started to get into hardware, I thought it was much more difficult than it actually is. It's really not that hard, and it's a great training ground to learn other skills like web app hacking and network services hacking. Because you can go to Amazon, Best Buy, or whatever, go spend $60 and you've just got a custom written web service, a custom written web browser, and all this other stuff that you can play with. So this is kind of the methodology that we use that I helped develop. So you start by taking the thing apart, voiding the warranty, if you will. Then identifying all the components. What are the things? How old, or in this case, trivial, are they? Pinout reversing, what's where? How do you connect to what? Where is that UART or JTAG interface? Then you connect to it and kind of go through your normal pen test circle. One thing that I'll illustrate that's very important is that pen testing is always an iterative process. You don't just look at the first go-around and stop there like, all right, we got root, we're done. Write the report and give it to the compliance auditor. That's not how it works. You really need to keep going through that process because inevitably you'll provide more value to your client. In addition, you'll find more findings, as we discovered. So where do we get the things to break? When I talk to people about this, whether at conferences or at work or at the bar, like, but all that stuff costs money, it's expensive. There's actually a lot of ways to get this stuff really cheap. So beta programs are awesome. Make sure you read the EULA, because some of them do stipulate no reverse engineering or things along that nature, or you can't break this open until after our demo is done and that sort of thing. But these companies, and these are just a few, if you search for IoT demo programs, you'll find many of them out there actually have programs where they will give you the hardware if you agree to run it in your house for 60 days or what have you. I mean, I did one where it was a home security system with cameras and everything, and I literally just pointed it in the corner in the basement. It gave them all the data that they needed, and I was able to do my testing. So flea markets are great. We're both from the Denver area, and we have this huge thing called the Mile High Flea Market where the understuffed go to get stuffed. eBay is great for test hardware. Don't ever buy anything that you actually want to rely on off of eBay. If you're trying to learn reverse engineering, a fun thing to do is buy the cheapest home router that you can find off of eBay and then go reverse engineer the code. More than likely, it's going to come with added value from whoever sold it to you. Craigslist is another awesome option, including garage sales, because everybody's got old Comcast modems or Linksys routers that they don't care about anymore. You go pick it up for $5, and if you break it, no harm, no foul, right? So, voiding the warranty. I always include this slide on here because it's always helpful to have when you go to Home Depot. That being said, I have seen somebody melt the end of a Bic pen and just mush it onto the screw and get it out that way too. But voiding the warranty, it is what it is. Some of the hardware we test for work, obviously, is a little more high dollar, and they know what's going to happen, so they provide multiples. But X-Acto knives, heat guns are really nice too if you're taking apart like a little USB key or something along those lines where it's heat sealed in. If you just hit it with the heat gun, usually it will come apart without actually destroying it.
What about the bean bags, an alternative to a heat gun?
I have bean bags? Like
I
bead
think so.
blasting?
There were like bags put in the microwave to loosen up grain, so you don't know if
I have not used that, but I wouldn't recommend putting electronics in the microwave.
No. The device, the bag you heat up,
Oh,
put it in the microwave,
interesting.
and then you place the device on it as soon as you pull it out of the microwave.
Interesting. I'll have to look into that. I've never tried that before. So tamper resistance, again, if you've bought it for your home, not such a big deal. If it's a little higher end device that you're able to get off Craigslist, a little more big of an issue. The left screenshot is actually from a device that I was testing for work. How many of you guys have ever done any hardware work before? Anybody? You guys ever run into epoxy, where they have epoxy the chip so you can't read it? That's what they did. See, you get all the black stuff, but you notice it also looks kind of shiny. So this was meant for a marine type environment where electronics get corroded and they often cover things in silicone and stuff like that so the moisture and stuff doesn't get in there. In this case, they put silicone below and above the epoxy. So literally my fingernail just took it off. So sometimes tamper resistant isn't actually, and sometimes it doesn't matter. So this is a similar picture from a device that I was testing for an engagement, where they had a tamper-resistant switch, but when you took the cover off, it was never depressed. And it never ceases to amaze me. But on our engagements, we always try and test the customer's response as well as breaking their things to, again, provide more value. So over coffee one morning, I sat there and I pressed the button for a good 40 minutes until I finally got a phone call. They were a little bit perturbed that they didn't know the alarm was going to go off, and I told them this scenario where we sat there over coffee and pressed it until they called us, and then they immediately went and fixed that problem. They had no idea the tamper switch never actually got activated. So component identification, we've torn it apart. Now we need to find the thing in the thing. What do you guys see? Those of you that have done this before or haven't or are curious. What seems interesting to you guys about that picture?
The fact that there's a cable soldered to the circuit board.
Yep, we definitely got some antennas here. Anything else?
Is there a wireless router?
It is a wireless router.
Ah.
I actually use this specific model because this talk is more about training and awareness and that kind of thing. I use this specific model because it's been around since wireless internet. This is the Linksys WRT54G that they then spun off. This is the L version, which disables all tamper protections and things like that. So it's these right here, and I don't remember, forgive me, which one or which. One of those is UART, and the other one is JTAG. So it's a great example because you can actually get in here and do this work without having to worry about being foiled by protections. So we have a Broadcom chip here. Back to the obsolete part. This is actually a new model that I bought off of Amazon, sold last year. And that specific system on a chip, or SoC, has been end of life for almost 6. Right? Not a whole lot of development going on there. I've got the wireless chipset under here, some flash, and some memory here, which are of a bit of interest once we get into the reverse engineering, but not much. These real headers are where it is at. So now we know what we need to find. How do we connect to it? That's what we discussed. So, arts and crafts time. I love that picture.
Oh.
It usually takes a second, but that was actually for an advertisement from a for-profit university on their electronics course. Nice. Yeah, that's great. So these are some of the things that you need for arts and crafts time. I think I stole that from some class I took. But debug headers, wiring, and a soldering iron is really all you need to get through this part on a basic level. That's a welder soldering unit you can get by for, I think we saw one today at Walmart because we forgot part of our demo, for $5 or $6. And this is trial and error. I took a class 4 or 5 years ago now with Joe Grant, and after at the end of that class, he gave me a little sticker that says, "You solder like a monkey," which I have worked hard to rectify. So finding ground, because without ground, this doesn't matter, right? Voltage is great. You need voltage for current, and you need voltage for input-output data transfer. But without a ground reference, you're not going to know what you're testing. One specific thing to note, some more high-end hardware has what's called a floating ground. So if it's supposed to operate at 5 volts, it'll have a floating ground that operates up and down in correspondence with all of the data that's being transferred. So not all ground is without voltage. Something to keep in mind. I've only seen that on a few medical devices, but it's there. And a great way to use this is the Fluke multimeter is what I use. They've got what I call beep mode. I'm not an electrical engineer. It beeps when I connect the 2 probes together. It's beep mode. Another caveat to that beep mode, what it's really doing is sending power in one side to power the speaker back in through the other side. And if you're working with sensitive electronics, that can actually be enough power to damage the circuit. So home stuff as you're learning, not usually a big thing, but as you go on in advance, that could be a problem. In this graphic over here, ground, usually on the side of the ground on the DC barrel plug, is a great way to look for it. Physical countermeasures. So I don't know, I saw some of you guys in the Senrio talk that they were doing earlier. This is kind of something that they were talking about as well, as pull up, pull down resistors, cut traces, things like that. This specific one was off of a SMB firewall that we were doing an engagement for. As you can see here, we've got some traces where they just left holes and nothing else. We got some solder pads here, and I couldn't represent this in a decent diagram, but this is how this worked. If you connected to this pin, and soldered this pad to this through hole, this pin, and this pin gave you UART. That took a really long time to figure out. So some of the common types of interfaces that you will see, UART, which is a form of serial. Do we have any of the old telecom guys in here like me that used RS-232 serial on old Cisco gear or anything like that? We got a few in here. It's slightly different. It operates at a lower voltage. And if you connect your UART device like the Shicker, the bus pyro, things like that, to an actual RS-232 interface, bad things happen to your test device. I2C, chip-to-chip communication, is also something you see. SPI for flash data transfer, you see that quite a bit as well. JTAG, which we brush up on quickly here, but not a lot, just because there is so much information to do with that, and I believe there are some people that teach several day courses on using JTAG. CAN bus is something that I'm starting to see more often in some of these bigger devices, typically associated with cars, but not always the case. We've seen CAN buses in ATMs and things like that as well. And then RS-232 serial, which you still do see in some devices outside the networking arena. So pinout reversing. So how do we connect to the thing? Salier makes a great logic analyzer. I know a lot of you guys in here are students. They do have an EDU discount. You just email them ahead of time, and you can get their, I believe this is the Soleil 8, and it's like $50 after their student discount. Really affordable. I often talk to folks that have bought these third-party black market off of eBay counterfeit from China kind of thing. It's just really not worth it. These function and are built better, and for $50, that's the cost of one of the cheaper devices you'll be working with. So connecting to interfaces. These are some of the more popular ones. The bus pirate I seem to see a lot more often. I don't know why. The Shicker is what I prefer. Made by Zebeder Senrio. They're gracious enough to sponsor this event as well. And then this TIAO USB multi-protocol adapter. This is kind of the one I started with, and I still use it. The reason being is you can do 2 interfaces at the same time, so I don't have to have like a USB hub full of Shickers sitting on my workstation. All good options. Some faster and slower and cheaper than others, but they're all, I mean, less than $50, I think. Quote me on that. So connecting to UART. This is that Linksys output. So literally, I had to change this screenshot here a little bit. It's not exactly how it looks. You hit the connect to the screen interface. This is on a Linux device. So on a Mac, it'd be devcu.tty. And that's how you connect in there. It'd be COM 1 through 5 on your Windows box. But you hit enter, and you get a prompt, and you literally just have a root shell on the device. So now we have a shell. But what now? I love that graph. So I used to have a book when I first started in InfoSec 7 or 8 years ago. As an information security officer, we had a book called No Tech Hacking, and it was just basically old Linux tips and tricks. And a lot of this stuff comes down to this. In this particular case, this was that same device I was showing you the silicone thing on before. And it's also a key reason why enumeration after you get access is so important. So we connect to this device, we hit enter, take a look at netstat or LSOF. Sometimes netstat's not always available on these devices. But you take a look at the running processes, and we see here that on port 5555, it's running THTTPD. Most people don't know this, but by default, its configuration is to run at root. And if you don't specify a directory, it's the root directory, which is really, really handy. And also something very easy to fix. On the bottom right-hand side, I protect the names of the not innocent. It was the SSID and everything. This was the wireless configuration file that it was using to connect to its remote base station. That also had the client passphrase, the AP passphrase, and the SSID to connect to. So I copied this over to my host, and I'm now on the wireless network that is the exact same as everything else that they're connecting to. Another simple example of this, the top left-hand corner, when you press I want to say it was like the restart button on the front of that Linksys router, it just dumps the clear text password out. Which is not all that helpful unless you bought it used from your neighbor. Because password reuse is a thing. So file system fiddling. This is probably the most fun thing that I enjoy on engagement. When I'm doing a pen test, I love post-exploitation. Popping shells is great, but where's their good stuff at? How do you make it valuable to the client? In a lot of cases, we've seen where they include sections of flash memory that are mounted to build the system or upgrade or do various things like that that are not there under normal operating circumstances. And this is one of those cases. This is a resource that I use because I am horrible, and if I don't do it every day, I don't remember it. These are kind of my cheat sheet on mounting different file system types and looking through devices on a machine. We'll send the slides out afterwards and tweet a link or whatever, but you guys will have this too. It's just another good resource, and it pretty much all came from this link down here on the bottom. But basically what we're trying to do is mount, think of it like your PC. You have the secret stuff that you don't want normal users to see on your machine, so maybe you have it in a removable hard drive or something like that. This is mounting their secret stuff to see what else is on there. In this case, we didn't have any real good way of getting it off. There was no netcat, there was none of that stuff. So, again, coffee break, pen testers, we need coffee. This took about 45 minutes to an hour, I want to say, but we base encoded the entire memory device and then captured that through a screen log, and then base 64 decoded it on our machine from the log and recreated the storage that way, which I thought was kind of a waste of time until we came up with this. So this is what I call SSH. Whoops. So I was going through there. In this, they had the actual history of every command run to build the system. This is their SSH private key without a password, along with the known hosts that they have used it to connect to. Yeah, not good. So, all right, you've got a shell. You need to play with memory or do some other trick to get access to the system. This is another option where, like direct memory access, something like that with JTAG is a great thing. Again, the Shikra will work for that. The Sega J-Link, I have a personal one that I use. They give a educational type use discount of cut a zero off, and that's what you can buy the educational version for. It does come with a little less functionality, but it's also $540 less. So it'll get you going. It's very helpful. A Lauterbach, something like that over here on the right, they get very expensive, but some of the more intricate chipsets and stuff like that, we have had to make up for our knowledge with some technology and use something like that. The JTagulator, Joe Grand's hardware project tool that he created, is phenomenal. I equate this to changing every single pin in every combination possible by hand for $180, I want to say. You can automate that, and it happens much, much quicker. You'll see what you need to connect to where, the type of device you have right here, which allows you to connect through typically OpenOCD, open software package out there. It's a great tool. But how do you connect with it? Well, here's the command for your guys' reference. Because again, this is all with that same Linksys router. As far as all the default installs on OpenOCD on BSD, you hit enter, and you see all these error messages that look really bad. However, it does open up 4 listeners on your machine that you can then connect into. Port 4444 is the teleinterface that you can actually connect into and get access to the debug information. And here you can see that exact same target name is what we had found in the previous configuration file. And from there, if you've done any Linux type exploit dev, printing out and grepping through memory registers, see MIPS here on the side. As long as you use the multi-arch extension from GDB, you can do that regardless of whether it's a MIPS or an ARM core. So reverse engineering, this is really kind of where it gets a little bit harder and diverts from the purposes of this type of talk. But these are some of the options that you have. IDA Pro is definitely the most common. It's what I use for personal research and for work stuff. Radar A2 is also good. Text-based multi-platform support, although no heat compiler. And another one worth noting is Binary Ninja. It's a newer tool. I believe they have a paid version out now. But the really cool thing about that is they've developed this intermediate language that once you learn that one, you can reverse engineer or script anything using that reverse engineering intermediate language. Yeah, pretty awesome. So other nice to haves, desktop power supply, USRP really, that's the one I have, but any sort of SDR, which we'll see here in just a moment. Hot air gun, circuit reader, Proxmark, also RFID is very common when you're dealing with hardware type devices. And if there's one thing that's worse than hardware security is the RFID tags that we all use for authentication. And a toaster oven or a hot air rework or a hot rework station. The only thing I have to say about that is know what type of connectors you're putting in there, because some of the Molex type connectors that you see on boards will actually melt under the heat. And don't eat out of that afterwards. We have one of the local hacker spaces where their toaster oven pulled multiple duties in order to save cost, and it's just not a good idea. So what's next? Now it's time for the hacking. 2 hands on 1 keyboard. Another great one. But anyway, so Justin Berry, I'll let him do the SDR portion of this demo with the security systems that we were working on. We do have an alarm that's going to go off, so if your ears are sensitive, I apologize.
We're going to wrap it with a t-shirt just to kind of dampen it. So, apologies if it's too loud. Give me just 2 seconds to set up a couple things here.
A little bit of backstory. We actually had a slow kind of few days at work, so we wanted to come up with some other project. Went out to Amazon and found this home security system here that we're working with. It seems to be rebranded under about 17 or 18 different names, all sold for relatively the same price on Amazon. And what we discovered was a vulnerability in its implementation for its sensors that is not just for this type of device. It also has to do with others as well. The home security system that my parents pay for through their cable company has this exact same flaw in it. Which is unfortunate, but it's kind of the society that we live in today. It's also why we like working on these types of projects. We're all about security, but when you implement something that's supposed to make you more secure, and it does the exact opposite, it's really kind of frustrating.
Like Max?
I don't like to drag people through the mud.
You don't have to, I will.
And so I sort of used a little Arduino hack sticker on the thing to obscure their logo. We did reach out to them, and they have yet to respond. But again, to not dredge anybody through the mud, we'll just leave their name out of it. But I imagine if you go to Amazon or anything else, you'll see something very similar to this. And again, this is not a new attack vector by any means. It's not like we're dropping some derivative or something like that. This is more of a good real-world affordable education example where other people can, learn from and reproduce and kind of get their feet wet themselves.
No? Okay. Get rid of your clicker.
Okay. Main reason we're plugging the cameras in so you can actually see the display. We have to work off of just the siren we can, but it does get annoying. There we go. Awesome. Thank you.
All right, let's just find out how loud this is. None, apparently. All right, we'll just go with the screen then.
They would probably actually appreciate that.
You're welcome, honestly. It's pretty piercingly loud.
I'm sure they've all seen Mr. Robot and been driven crazy.
All right, so kind of a pivot from what Price was talking about with all the hardware stuff. How many people have experience with SDR? Very few. All right, cool. Then this will be valuable to a lot of people, hopefully. All right, so SDR, what does it mean? Yeah. I actually have it as, no, you're incorrect. It's special drawing right created by the IMF in 1969 as a sub, no, just kidding. All right, that's the Steve Harvey there. So SDR, it is in fact software-defined radio. It's a radio communication system where components that that have typically been implemented in hardware are instead implemented by means of software running on a personal computer or embedded system. So here's just a few different types. In my opinion, these are probably the most popular SDRs. You might, your mileage may vary. The one on the left there is the RTL SDR. It can be had for about $25 off of Amazon. It's very similar from what I saw to the one they're selling out there in the lobby. Its advantage is it's cheap, and it will let you sort of get your feet wet with SDR to determine if you want to invest money in one of the nicer ones. The disadvantage to it is it's receive only, so you can't actually transmit it, which is only going to net you so much fun. So it's only going to be fun for about this amount of time. It took all of about 20 minutes of me playing with it before I realized that I was going to have to spend some money to actually have a good time with it. The HackRF1 there in the middle, that's what we're going to be using today. Let's take a look at. Significantly more expensive, about $315 off of Amazon. It's a Great Scott Gadgets project. Michael Osman actually designed it. He runs Great Scott Gadgets. He's doing a class in Black Hat in Vegas this year. Highly recommend it. You can receive and transmit with it only at half duplex. However, I haven't come across any sort of event where I needed full duplex. Thus the reason I did not spend the $900 on the USRP. It is full duplex, receive and transmit. Like Price said, this is the one that he has because he always has to one-up me for whatever reason. This one is more high-end. It's got dual antennas that are configurable. There again, like I said, full duplex is probably the big selling point for it with the dual antennas. Just not anything I've needed for it at this point, so the price point to feature set wasn't really worth it for me. And apparently, I don't know if you guys knew, but these cause tornadoes. Sure you guys all recently heard the Dallas tornado siren hack. All the tornado sirens were triggered. They did come out and disclose that it was not a network level attack. Based on how those are triggered, the assumption is it was probably an SDR attack. So how could they have done this? They could have recorded the commands during a system test or an actual tornado and just done a replay attack and replayed it. If there's no authentication, I mean, there's no real details out on it yet, so nobody really knows at this point. But me and a couple guys at our office have had a few good laughs and think this is probably how it happened. This is my favorite part. The only way to actually stop those sirens was to unplug the radio systems and the repeater. It took them a long time to actually power down that entire thing.
They left the physical keys in it too.
Did they? We will get into a similar conundrum of whether or not this was done maliciously or were they just trolling. We will kind of get into a similar conundrum in a little bit. So a couple types of software here. Again, I think these are the most popular. I don't have a ton of experience in this, but enough for this project to actually make it worthwhile. So on the left, we've got GNU Radio. In my personal opinion, GNU Radio seemed very sort of a steep learning curve at first. It's block-based. It is very powerful from what I've seen, but there's a steep learning curve. The Great Scott Gadgets website, they've got a ton of material on it to go and learn if you want to learn how to use it. Personally, for me, GQRX, couldn't find a logo for them, so wrote one up in Paint. Their interface was much more intuitive, in my opinion. It was pretty much dive right in and get going on it. A few tweaks here and there, and you're pretty good to go. In all actuality, I was walking through our office one day, and a coworker had what this is called the waterfall. Had the waterfall up, and of course, if this didn't immediately attract your attention, something's wrong with you. So this caught my attention. Asked him what's going on. He showed me. Then I bought the little tiny SDR, and then I spent $330 buying this bigger one. So, thanks. Oh, and a quick thing. GQRX is actually built on top of GNU Radio, so it's more of just a better interface to use it. So, without further ado, let's get into some demos. What's your favorite radio station around here? Anyone? Good rock station. Anyone? Oh, got it. All right. And we'll just pick a random one.
104.1.
Let's give it a shot. If this doesn't work, it's your fault. Thanks. And I'll go over some of the tweaking parameters and everything over here in just a second.
104.3 maybe.
104.3?
So you should get a signal, but it'll just probably be a little bad.
Not seeing a lot, man. I'm not gonna lie.
Here you go.
We got 4 choices. See if any of those.
Well, I'll just try one of these other ones. It's really just a quick demo. It doesn't really matter. So this is the waterfall, like I was talking about earlier. So you've got all these little different colored streams, as I would call them. Those are obviously different signals. The range that we're in, the spectrum that we're in, is 104.3. So obviously everything right here in this area is going to be radio stations, right? So I would say the easiest way to look at this is based on signal strength. Blue is kind of like your control test. You've got the yellows, which are more intense. Obviously, this one's got a red in the middle, so that means it's stronger, right?
What type of antenna are you using?
The ANT 500, ANT 500, that came with it.
Is it small attached, not external?
That guy right there.
Yeah, it's a closed hanger. It's better than a closed hanger, but not a great antenna.
It gets the job done. There you go. $315 radio comes free with any car you buy. Thank you. Good night. All right, so that's just a quick demo to kind of get your feet wet and take a look at what you can do. Up here at the top is the spectrum panel. Down here is the waterfall. Those are the two main components, obviously. Over here on the side, you've got a couple different things you can change. In the interest of time, I'll just kind of skip over most of it and just kind of talk about the high points. Let's go some of the sliders here. So this frequency zoom, if you can see right here, there's 101, here's 108. So this is the entire spectrum between 101 and 108 megahertz. You can take this frequency zoom and actually dial in to whatever frequency it is that you're trying to see. Obviously, the stream gets bigger. Long story short.
you're trying to pull down like a police radio or something along those lines, or pagers, as we'll see here in a few minutes, that fine-grained detail actually makes sense, because once you get out of the core band of that signal, it really distorts and you get awkward beeps and other things. And
Yeah. Sometimes you have to dial it in really fine to what you need, so it's pretty handy. The general rule of thumb that... I'm sorry?
what's that?
Voice radio is encrypted.
Some, yes, they actually, so I come from that background, they have the ability to encrypt. A lot of it is still unencrypted, and most of the encryption that they do use is still RC4 based, which there are other distros out there to bypass that and break through that as well with weak ciphers.
Is that a good idea?
I'm not saying
It's
I'm doing it.
good question.
I'm just saying people have.
We don't condone it, we're just saying it's possible.
From what a lot of the guys who knew about ham radio said, listening, bueno, breaking encryption, no bueno.
Yeah. I like not inside of bars.
Yeah. The general rule of thumb that the guy that actually got me into this, the general rule of thumb that he told me might be true, I don't know, seems to work well for me, is you want to get your waterfall a dark blue color. So, like I said, high-level overview, some of these sliders you can tweak, kind of move it around, until you get that background to a sort of darker blue color.
Which just helps you realize the signal, especially for more faint signals as well.
Yeah.
It's helpful.
So as you can see, when the background gets darker, the signal kind of stands out a whole lot more, so it helps you identify really faint signals. Same with this, up here at the top, this slider here can adjust your spectrum where it lands. I like to keep it right on top of the waterfall and make it pretty prominent as such. So any really faint signals, like this one right here, you're going to see a spike. It's really easy to identify visually. It makes that a lot easier. I talk like I've identified some really weak signals before. Haven't. I'm just saying if it ever came about, that's probably how I would do it, I'm guessing. All right, so in a nutshell, that's why I like GQRX, because you can pretty much dive right in, play with some settings. I'm sure you guys are all tinkerers. I didn't really look up half the stuff yet before I even played with it. I just started playing with it until I realized what it did and then kind of did some research on it. But yeah, you can dive right in, and it's really easy to get some fun stuff out of it pretty quick. So next demo, pagers. Disclaimer. This is something you can do pretty easily, but the information that you can obtain can be sensitive, so it should be treated properly, obviously. We've made every effort to make sure that no sensitive data gets distributed or seen or anything like that. Basically, if you're scared, don't do this. That's pretty much what we're saying.
And it's encoded, not encrypted.
Correct. A couple of prerequisites for this. You need socks installed as well as Multimon NG. Whatever distro you're using, or if you're using Mac, maybe Windows, I haven't really checked, you'll probably need those installed through various package managers or through sort of complete packages, binaries, that sort of thing.
So one of the abilities that GQRX has is to be able to stream the data out over a UDP port, and then you can then receive that data over UDP, decode it, and view it.
Right, so basically we're going to be listening on UDP port 7355. We can tune into a frequency that pagers come across. I don't remember exactly what it is off the top of my head, but we'll look at it shortly because I have it bookmarked. You can dump that all out to a UDP port, which is what we're going to do. So that raw output is going to come to a UDP port. It's going to get piped into SOX with a few parameters. It's going to go from there and get piped into Multimon NG with a few other parameters. We're actually going to dump that out to a file, and then we're going to tail that file so we can grep out any sensitive information, which is how we're preventing any sensitive information from being disclosed.
Part of that is you guys can imagine who still uses old school drug dealer pagers.
Yeah.
It's
To actually capture this, I'm going to use the HackRF transfer binary. I'm sure you can do this with GQRX or probably GNU Radio, but this was just way simpler and quicker, and it worked really well for me. So your mileage may vary on however you want to do it. This is how I did it. So we're going to receive into a file. We'll call it disarm. Frequency is 433.929100. We'll turn on the amplifier, and we'll turn on listen gain to 26. And before I do that, so that is receiving. We've captured it. All right, so we're going to arm this. Everybody make out what that says. Disarmed.
Yes, we can.
Apparently got to hit it twice. So it's armed. And then to transfer it, same thing, except we're going to use transmit gain instead, and we're going to transmit the file instead of receiving the file. There you go. So your $3,000 guitar now is sitting in my basement, just so you know. So what else can we do? Let's have some fun with it. Remember that conundrum about security versus trolling? So the SOS button, let's go ahead and capture that.
This is where you're happy the speaker's not working.
This can all be mitigated by buying a unit that doesn't come with a remote, right?
Yeah. Yeah, basically.
This part of it can, yes.
Yeah.
We continue on here after the trolling demo. Or even a remote with rolling codes as well. Like most garage doors nowadays actually have rolling codes that it uses.
So we just captured the SOS button, which is essentially the panic button. Obviously, it's SOS alarming now. So basically, if you're sitting about a block away from your target's house and they happen to use this remote, I mean, you can have some fun with them. For example,
We did test it. We're about a block and a half to 2 blocks away from my house. This does still work.
Now,
Yep, question?
this is deliberate, but if you've ever had a wireless doorbell, the longer the street is, the more likely it is that somebody else has the same frequency, that's the same thing.
Yep.
all right, so the other thing is that these capture files can be treated exactly just like any other file. So literally all I did there was just append one file to another. Let's see, it's disarmed, it's SOS'd, alarming, and it's disarmed again. So the other cool thing is the HackRF binary has a repeat function. Armed, alarming. Disarmed. Alarming. So on and so forth, right? Yeah. A lot of fun stuff there. So the other thing that we discovered was the door sensor. Obviously, you screw one piece into the wall, one piece to your door, your window. Whenever the sensor breaks, it alarms, and it gives it a specific zone number. It's kind of hard to read, but it says zone-010. So this specific sensor is tied to a specific zone in your house. Runs on the same frequency as everything else. So let's capture that. Change it to transmit. As you can see, it's armed. Now someone's chasing down a window in their house. and you're laughing hysterically outside.
And while it is a little harder to capture, the reverse of this is as well. That retransmission that we saw where it said closed, you can replay that as well, and the system never knows the window or door or motion sensor was set off.
Yeah, it just transmit a different command, same frequency. It's a little bit race condition opportunistic, but yes, you can just repeatedly transmit the close code and kick a door open, and it's not going to trigger. So again, if you wanted to have some more fun with that, we did. Let's see.
4 minutes.
4 minutes.
Okay.
Got a question.
Yep.
Yeah.
Does this unit log? It doesn't log.
Not to my knowledge, no.
No, and so when we were picking this specific one out, we kind of went with the cheaper it is, the more sensors we have, the more footprint we can play with. Typically, the cheaper the hardware, the more problems it has. This unit was actually so not smart. It didn't actually have much of an underlying OS or any logging or anything like that. The only option you had was adding a 3G card to it to be reported, but that wasn't even a service they offered. You had to go through and get the SIM card and do it all yourself.
Yeah, in the interest of time, I won't do that next part, but you can also append that door sensor to the same running file that we had. So it can SOS, disarm the system, arm the system, trigger this, and then disarm it again, and just play it on repeat, and just watch the owner just go haywire with their alarm system. No, I wouldn't put this in my house.
No, his parents.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were dismayed.
Yeah. Last demo we have, frequency jamming is illegal, so we did frequency fuzzing. We basically wired up an RF transmitter to a 9-volt battery, and it just transmits a whole lot of crap on the same frequency, 433, same frequency range as all this other stuff.
Wait, so that's legal?
It's fuzzing. And just so you can see what that looks like.
And this also is a technique that we've used on red teams for work engagements as well, to not set off their motion sensors. Because literally, you can do this while walking through a decent amount of businesses, and it doesn't actually set off the motion sensors. And they don't alarm out or heartbeat out or anything like that to actually check in.
So that's, obviously this is where it's just broadcasting a bunch of junk. This is normal looking, just back and forth, right? We tested that with this unit, and it interferes so much with the communication between the sensors and the unit that it doesn't even trigger an alarm. So we can actually arm it. It's armed. Oh, you see? Oh, probably can see it, don't you?
And we tested this in our office, and from about 90 feet away, this works.
So you got it transmitting?
Yeah.
Broadcasting? Nothing. And then you want to let it off, or?
Yeah.
Obviously, the alarm's in when it's not broadcasting.
And these little Arduino transmitters work up to about 19 volts. After that, they just get warm.
We plugged a laptop power supply into it, and it just stopped working. So the moral of the story of this whole thing, this thing is garbage. Don't use a remote with an alarm system. It's a risk versus reward scenario. All you're doing is extending your capacity for laziness, and then you're introducing way more risk into your the system that's supposed to keep you and all your stuff secure, right? That's all I got.
Contact.
Also some resources on SDR stuff, if SDR stuff and hardware hacking stuff, if you guys are interested.